Today it is a real honour to introduce you all to the photographer Kathryn Chapman. Kathryn is a portrait and self-portrait photographer who back in 2018 photographed herself, and in doing so she was able to overcome her lifelong battle with depression. She now has a business where she goes about photographing other people and working with them to overcome their own mental health struggles and insecurities. Her story is a truly compelling one, and I was deeply honoured to be able to interview her and listen to her progress through her own struggles and how photography was able to help her do this. Now, I must mention before we begin that there are some topics in this video that some people might find quite difficult to listen to, including the mention of sexual assault. While Kathryn doesn't go into much detail on this, I just wanted to mention it before we begin in case it's something that you may find difficult to listen to. But on the whole, this interview is a very inspiring one, and I hope that it'll really help you all in uncovering your photographic voice, but also working through your own difficulties and mental health struggles. So without further ado, let's welcome Kathryn Chapman. Hi Kathryn, how are you doing?
Hi Kim, I'm good. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. Really good. And I first just wanted to say I'm so grateful to have you here today. I saw your webinar that you did on SheClicks back at the sort of start of March, I think it was, and I was really compelled by your photography and more specifically your story. So anybody watching this just now will know that I don't do portraiture photography. It's photographing people isn't necessarily something that interests me personally. I like to be out in nature. But your photographs are so emotive, and your reasoning behind what you do, I just connected so deeply with it, and I just knew, the moment I got the email saying you were speaking, I just knew I had to come along and watch. So for anyone who actually doesn't know what you do, I just wondered, could you tell everyone in your own words, who is Kathryn and what got you into photography?
Bless you. Well, thank you so much for inviting me on today. It's a real honour for me to be here with you. So thank you. So my photography journey started when I was 8, when I got my first camera. I don't know if you remember in the 70s, those thin slidey ones.
I've seen them.
You're probably a lot younger than me.
Yeah, I have seen them, but I've never had any experience with them.
So that was my first one. So there's this really weird slidey thing, and then I got my first proper, as I say, my proper camera when I was about 12, I think. And it was my dad who helped me, show me how to use it. So it was really, my passion started when I was 8, and it's not left me, and it's grown obviously as I've grown, but it's just introduced me to this fascinating other world of how the camera sees stuff, how I see the world through my camera. And I'm always often frustrated, but always intrigued at how stuff looks differently through the lens as it does to the naked eye. Obviously, the camera just doesn't have the color spectrum that our eyes do, and the peripheral vision and all of that. But that always for me is interesting and a challenge. So it's about being able to use the camera creatively to be able to communicate how I experience the world, and how I want others to notice more of themselves, and to give them a little kind of window into how I see the world, I suppose. And so it's something I've always wanted to do, and I started it professionally when I was off on mat leave with my daughter. And previous to that, I'd worked in newspapers, I worked in the third sector, so I'd kind of had a bit of a different career path. But I finally got round to doing what I was always wanted to do, and the day I called myself a photographer, I think it's one of the happiest days of my life. I don't remember specifically where I was and what I was doing, but I remember the feeling. You always remember how you feel, don't you? And I couldn't quite believe that the words were coming out of my mouth. So it's been a wonderful journey, and I started off in family photography, then I went on to weddings and events, product photography, so it was people and things. And I've always, I love that you're not into portrait photography, you're into landscape. I can't do landscape. It doesn't light my fire either. And but it's interesting what does and what doesn't for different people. And for me, portrait photography is I've always found it a deeply meaningful challenge to be able to get shots of people that they like, and that they want to have on their wall. And doing what I do now with something that's so deeply personal with people, that's, it's kind of the next level challenge, I suppose, for me, is really challenging myself to create images so my clients can challenge their self-perceptions and improve how they see themselves, so they can see themselves better.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. I love when you say that when you called yourself a photographer, that feeling that you had. I mean, we all know when we start pursuing something that we love, that feeling of being able to do that professionally, it's overwhelming sometimes, isn't it? You just feel like, you finally got to that stage where you're not doing a job that, maybe doesn't ignite your soul, and you're finally doing something where you can be creative and express yourself. And I find it really interesting that when you initially started, you went down the more stereotypical routes, of doing weddings and that sort of family shoots and stuff, which I think is what kind of everybody ends up doing. They go through some sort of traditional way. But what I love now is that what you do, I think, is so unique, and I find it so inspiring, the work that you're doing now. And for anyone that doesn't know, you says on your website, you're a portrait and self-portrait photographer who believes that photography has the power to unlock emotion and reveal insight into who we are. So delving a little bit more deeply into that you did a self-portrait shoot of yourself back in 2018, I think it was, and it completely changed your life. And I think it's incredible that you had the drive to photograph yourself, because a lot of people who photograph others, it's very much about their clients and they want to portray these people. But for you to turn that round and photograph yourself, it must have taken a lot of courage to do that, because I don't know, I found a lot of people who photograph, portraits and stuff, they're quite secretive as photographers. It's almost like they delve into the world of other people, but you don't really get to know them. And the fact that you go out there and photograph yourself, and this shoot in particular, I'd love you to speak about this, because it's just, I think it's such an extraordinary experience that you had, and I'd love people to hear more about it.
Yeah, it was extraordinary. And I still find myself going, oh, did that really happen? So I don't know if you're like me, but if you get an idea in your head of an image that you want to create and it doesn't go away, you have to create it, don't you? So I had just come to the end of a year-long bout of talking therapy, and I'd been in and out of talking therapy for like 25 years up until that point, and that really was it was only the second most useful talking therapy I've had, and the one before, the first one was the one before. So I literally 2016 2017 found some really good therapists, and I hadn't had good ones before, or I wasn't ready, or it wasn't for me, or it was a bad match, or whatever. It just wasn't working, and I blamed myself. But I'd had some really good therapy, last couple of therapists, and I was coming to the end of the second one, and an idea for an image had popped into my head about 3 months before the end, and it just wouldn't go away. It wouldn't go away and wouldn't go away. And I thought, well, this therapy's ending, and I want to continue the work that I was doing. And I was in a space of understanding my depression, and understanding my why, but still not being able to come out of it, and not being able to, I thought when I had the reasons why I was depressed, then everything else would kind of follow and I would feel better, but I didn't, and I couldn't understand why. And although it was good therapy, I was still really frustrated, and it was like the ultimate challenge to myself. I said to myself, I want to look myself in the eye. I want to see if it's as bad as it feels, and if it's not, I'm just going to go, well, you're making a fuss about nothing. Move on and park it, and just accept that you're going to feel like that for the rest of your life. So that was kind of it. It was a real, this is it moment. And I had a lot of those, an awful lot of those over the past 25 years. Every time I started therapy, I would often say, this is the last time I'm doing this. I'm not doing it anymore because I haven't got the energy. But this really was it, because this was so different. And this was about me facing myself fully. This wasn't about feeling it. This was about seeing it. So I sat with my most difficult emotions and photographed what was there. And I didn't shoot to share in the slightest. And it was quite a uncomfortable process in terms of sitting with how I was feeling, but I sat with everything and I wanted to photograph all of it. And what I saw in the images was really, really surprised me, because I didn't see somebody that I didn't like. I didn't see somebody that made me wince when I looked at her because I thought, she looked ugly or it was embarrassing or whatever. None of that, which really surprised me. What I saw was a woman in pain and a lot of agony and angst, and she needed someone to help her, and the only person that could help her was me. And that was, I've gone goose pimply. Wow. It was such a moment. It still affects me. I still have that, embodied response to how it was. It was so extraordinary. And what I saw in those images made me look after myself. And I'd never done that before. So I started self-care. I started mindfulness and meditation and more regular exercise. I began to eat well. I tackled my drinking, all those kinds of things. But I didn't go hell for leather. I did one tiny weeny thing every day. And when I mean tiny weeny, it was tiny weeny. It was literally, I would experiment with being present for literally 2 seconds, just to see what it would feel like and if I could do it. And I was like, oh, that I could do that. That felt nice. So maybe the next day I might try for a few more seconds. And then that spurred me on to try other things like meditation. 5 minutes, that was it. Looked on the internet, 5-minute guided meditation for anxiety. And I'd do that, and that would help. And then, and also tapped into my spiritual side, which I'd not done for many years. So I kind of went and sat in my church and cried and cried and cried, but felt things that I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. But it was all very holistic. So each part of me needed nourishment. And I began to work out when certain parts of me needed that nourishment more than others. So that was really interesting. I started really listening to myself. And through the images, I'd borne witness to myself. So I started to like myself. And I'd never ever done that before. And show myself compassion. That was the biggest thing, was I suddenly had compassion for myself as somebody who needed care and looking after. And because I wasn't in my head with all the mess, those vital inches between my brain and the screen allowed me that objectivity and therefore that compassion, and allowed me to see myself as somewhat almost a different person. So it was quite extraordinary. And then 5 months later, literally only looked at my images once, and that effect lasted. Well, it's lasted ever since, but I didn't look at them again for another 5 months. And when I did, I was absolutely amazed at how differently I felt again towards the person in the images. And I was able to sit with more of the images for longer because they were quite challenging. And that journey that I took in 5 months is now a key part of what I do with my clients when I take them through it. And with all the work I do, actually having that initial look at your images, and then having a look a few months later, you can then be retrospective and reflective and see how far you've come, because we do so much work on ourselves that we don't give ourselves credit for. And imagery is a great way to anchor that and to see and feel and notice the work that we're doing on ourselves.
It's so beautiful, I think, to be able to see yourself in an image and not judge that woman and see beauty in her. And then I love the way that you looked at your images and then waited 5 months before you looked at them again. Because as you say, with a self-care journey, and especially when you relate to yours, you do a tiny thing every day, but that tiny thing is getting you in a new direction. But if you were to look at those images every day, you wouldn't see the change. But by giving it that, 5 months, you look at those images and you think, wow, I forgot how much pain I was in 5 months ago. And although I'm still in pain, you can see that you're not quite as bad as you were 5 months ago and how far you've come. And that story that you tell there, it's almost like an awakening, isn't it? It's about realizing who you are and connecting to that, and then having the ability to share that and then do it with other people, I find it incredible. And before we go on to what you actually do with other people now in more detail, I wanted to actually share some of your images that you know you took within these shoots of yourself. And I remember you shared these during the She Clicks, you know, some of these during your She Clicks webinar, and you got the audience to say how they felt when they looked at these images, and the feelings people were coming up with. You know, some of them were very similar, but it was interesting to see how everyone reacted to these images differently, because we all have different emotional experiences in life, and you know, we all reacted slightly differently. But it's like, especially this image, when I look at this image, I feel really sad and trapped, and it reminds me so much of how I used to feel about 10 years ago. And I get this almost like tenseness in my throat when I look at this image, because it brings back a lot for me, not in a negative way, but it's like I can see myself in this image. And I'd love you to speak about this image specifically, because you know, almost the thought you put into this to portray how you felt at the time. You know, I'd love to hear from your words. Can you remember how you felt when you took this image?
Gosh, I don't think I've ever been asked that question. So before I answer that, I just want to say thank you for what you've reflected back. And that there's a lot there that will help you with what may still be left for you to work out, you know, where you might have been. And it is all about reflecting what comes up for us. So I'm really trying to notice and be with you in your noticing, and feel what I'm noticing. Because I have this image above my desk and I see it every day, but seeing it with somebody is a different experience. And I'm just wondering how I'm reacting to it now. I'm feeling quite emotional. It was 4 years ago. 4 years ago, in fact, on Monday, I did this shoot. And I don't remember dates, but this one I've made myself remember, because it was so pivotal in my life. So I don't think I remember how I felt. I think I'm like, this was really early on in the shoot, because I used theatrical blood as well, and that was really messy and very sticky, and I had my dog sniffing around, really inquisitive. The barbed wire was really difficult to work with because it was incredibly pingy. I bought some really rubbish fake barbed wire that was made out of, I think, mock leather or something, and it was floppy and it didn't work, and it wasn't shiny either. And so I thought, well, I'm going to have to buy some, and it comes coiled in this bucket, and the pointy bits were actually pointing outwards, so it was possible to unravel it, because I wrapped it around my stomach. I photographed my stomach because I've had multiple miscarriages, and I also put it around my feet and my legs, and photographed that for sexual assault and rape as well. That was all part of my shoot. But this was really early on. I think this was a bit like, holy fuck moment, like, I've started this now. And it's tight and it's pushing on me. You know, I did have to be really careful, because it's very pingy when you uncoil it. It just kind of twangs. And this kind of hat effect thing, that was entirely unintentional, and you know, weird. But I think I felt like I was totally and utterly lost. I had nowhere to turn. I used to have this visualization that came to me an awful lot through my depression, where I was in a dark room with my back to the door, and the only senses I had were hearing and touch, which ironically is my trauma. Not ironically at all, but that was my trauma response during rape. So all my other senses disappeared. So I lost my sense of sight and taste and smell and everything. That's literally all I had. I just was completely frozen, and so that kind of reminds me of that a little bit. And I think just I was feeling utterly hopeless. utterly hopeless, completely lost, rock bottom again, and no idea if this would work, what I was going to see. All I was focused on actually was getting through it. I wasn't focused at all on what the outcome would be. I was just focused on expressing my emotions and doing it. And I think I might have done this big sigh, taken the shot, first shot. It was probably first or second shot I took. And it's kind of like, though my eyes in that shot can say so much. You know, it will say whatever what needs to say for whoever looks at it and whatever they get from it. But for me, it encompasses practically everything that space I was in at the time. And it's interesting because this is the image I used when I started telling people that I was doing this now for other people. And 2 people said to me who came to do a shoot, they said to me they didn't need to read what I'd written because they knew exactly what the post was about, which I found extraordinary and, you know, really flattering. So yeah, it's very interesting you asking me that question, because I really feel it in the middle of my chest. You know, it's a real kind of heart-wrenching feeling, and you know, to the point where I can't put it into words because I don't need to, because I know what it means to me. It was the beginning of the end of my depression, and I'd been depressed for as long as I could remember. I mean, even back to when I was about 4, I think. And in that sense, I mean, the enormity of this image for me, I would never be able to say. I never. It's the end and the beginning and everything.
I'm so grateful that you feel able to be so honest about this, you know, and the things that, you know, went on in your life in younger years that led up to everything. And, you know, you say putting it into words, you know, it's difficult, isn't it? You know, it's almost overwhelming. But, you know, one thing I'm learning is that feeling is in some ways so much more powerful than words. And, you know, you feeling this and the feeling that this image, when people look at it, what they feel, like, as you said, it doesn't need to be put into words, you know. And I think from a creative perspective, you know, you obviously thought quite deeply about this image and what, you know, prop you could use to really showcase how you were feeling. But it's also about how you've, you know, portrayed yourself here, from everything from your eyes to your hair to the fact that your teeth show. It's almost like you're clenching your teeth in some way to hold everything in, and you can see all of that. And the fact that, you know, you're clearly naked at the top half. I don't know whether you're fully naked, but definitely the top half as well. It's that vulnerability, and, you know, you're lying there or sitting there naked and nobody's really seeing you. You feel so helpless with your emotions, and all that comes across in this image. And while it's such a, you know, heart-wrenching sort of feelings that maybe come up for people, and you know, maybe sadness and despair and helpless, there's also so much power in that. And the fact that this changed your life, but other people looking at this, you know, their lives are changing by looking at it as well, because they can relate to it. The fact that photography can do that is beautiful. I don't know, it blows my mind. It absolutely blows my mind.
It does me as well. And, you know, 4 years on, I'm still looking at these images. I'm still learning from them. They will be the eternal growth that I need forever. And they're my life anchor. They help me make sense of what was it, you know, what was before the shoot, what was at the time, and where I am now, and how they inform me moving forward. And I find that extraordinary. And that, just like you said, the power of photography never ceases to amaze me. And the more I do this work, the more my mind is blown. And, you know, you mentioned the fact that I'm naked on the top. My hair is, you know, as it is. I did my makeup. I had the barbed wire. I mean, none of that was a particularly conscious decision. And I've just noticed when you mentioned that brought up to me the fact that I did that because it felt like the right thing to do. And yes, I'm sure on some kind of somatic level, there was this, you know, unconscious desire to show more vulnerability by not having my top on. And being kind of half naked. But it wasn't something that I thought, oh, I must be half naked because that is important. It was just, well, that's how it feels. And that's how I work more and more now. I work on an intuitive basis, and I do something called that I've called boundaried freedom. So which means I have this kind of idea of where, who, and where I'm going to shoot, who I'm shooting, and how it might look. So you kind of style it, but beyond that, and beyond the processes that I've got, everything is intuitive. So you have the boundaries, so you can then have the freedom. And the boundaries are emotional, they're practical, and they're stylistic boundaries as well. But within that, when you know where the boundaries are, you can move freely within that. And that's what I didn't realize I'd given myself. And that's what I now consciously give my clients.
And that kind of leads on really nicely, actually, to the work that you do now. You work with clients to almost discover themselves through photography, and I'd love you to speak through that process, because I think it's so beautiful. You speak about how much therapy and whatnot you've been through in your life. I imagine there was other things you must have tried when you were younger as well, to move forward from things. And I'm the same. I've had therapy on and off since I was 18, and I kind of look at that, and while it's helped me a lot, I'm only getting to the stage now where I'm finding people who actually are fully helping me. And I've had very similar experiences to you, where I've seen therapists that you speak about stuff but they don't really help you progress forwards with them, and you don't feel like you can get to the root of it, and then suddenly you find somebody who can, and it's like, wow, this is incredible. But what you're doing with photography is you're offering people actually a chance to fully see themselves. People who I know people all come for you, for different reasons and at different stages of their process of self-development. But I imagine a lot of them have been through therapy, who have probably been on, high doses of antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication, for instance, potentially. And then they come and see you and they do these shoots, and it's like a light bulb moment of, actually, there is so much beauty in me, and I'm not disgusting or whatever people may think of themselves, and I am lovable, and look at me. And they can see that vulnerability in them, and maybe the pain that they're feeling, but on in a different medium. And I imagine it can just, for so many people, it can change their lives. If anybody's interested, on your website, you've got some incredible testimonials, and I'd love to hear more about your process of working with people to do this, because I think it's so unique and a really honourable way, a beautiful way of using your gift as a photographer to help other people.
Thank you. Well, that was the kind of unwitting result. One of the unwitting results of the shoot was I found my life purpose. Suddenly all my trauma made sense in terms of I can now use what I know through it for good. And this is just one way to experience yourself, and it's not the way, it's one of a basket of ways. And particularly women who've come to me very similar to me, done a lot of talking therapy, and they're just it's just not getting through, and this is a way for it to smash through that, because it is beyond words. You don't need words. You feel it, and it is all about the felt experience. It's all about noticing what's going on in your body. And then there's the self-acceptance in the journey of the images. When you see lots of different sides of yourself, and you see that they're all valid, and that they all need airtime, and they all need to be seen and heard and validated, that self-acceptance suddenly becomes holistic. You suddenly go, okay, I'm not perfect, no one's perfect, and I love my imperfection. I now love that I'm angry. Right? I mean, people don't talk about their anger. I have very good reason to be angry, and I'm not ashamed of that. And that's kind of who I am now. It was at a rage point. That's not very healthy. But now I just have a bit of anger about stuff. And I know that is nothing to be afraid of. And I know when I'm feeling angry, I know what I need to do about it to look after myself, and how I need to process that. And when you can see all of those sides of yourself, it's like there's nothing left to hide. There's nothing left to hide from others and to hide from yourself. You know, here you are in all your glorious mess, and every part of you is beautiful, and that's a really liberating, freeing, relief, you know, inducing thing to feel. It's lovely. And so the image that we saw with my barbed wire, I called that my face-to-face shoot, because I was facing myself fully, looking myself in the eye and seeing how bad it really was. And that's what excuse me, that's what I call it. And that's what I kind of put out there, you know, 8 months after my shoot, because I was in such a great place. I thought, can I offer this to other women? And I did, and I spent all of 2019 photographing women for it. And I got, I mean, so much more amazing results than I ever thought I would. And it's basically, we're just having a chat, you know. There's nothing that I can do to make people say what they aren't ready to say or aren't ready to feel. And I'm not a therapist. I am literally bearing witness through the camera. That's it. I'm not there to fix anyone. I'm not there to give anyone answers. I'm there to listen and not to judge, and to be a safe space, and to create something that will last a lifetime and be the eternal learning for my clients.
It's so beautiful that you can offer that. And I think my relationship with photography really resonates with yours. You know, you've had this experience. Photography in many ways has saved your life, I would say. You know, it's saved you overcome all this stuff, and then you've gone on to do what helped you with other people. And it's like with me, I always said that photography and nature saved my life. So I now go out and do a lot of mindful photography stuff with people, get them outdoors and share with them how nature and being out with your camera and seeing that the beauty of nature can change and, who knows, maybe save their lives too. And again, it comes back to that power of photography. It's just immense. It's beautiful. But we all, I think that this is what I love about photography, is that it is endless. You know,
it is
genres. It's just endless.
And I was watching your videos, and I loved that one of you on the beach with your shoes off, and you were noticing what's under your feet, and taking your shoes off demanded you to notice more, because you were being more careful about where you were stepping. And then the mindfulness that came through that, I love that. And that but you know, somatic experience is so gifting, isn't it? Because it does literally make you slow down and notice more. And it's so important. I love the mindful photography you do. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, that video for me is the first time in a long time that I felt completely myself on camera. So I'm kind of going through this process just now, which is actually something I wanted to speak to you about, you know, reading your website and how you do your business. You know, I found when I started doing YouTube, I did YouTube for fun initially. It was never a business thing. I found I was able to be myself in the beginning. You know, it was freeing to be able to put stuff out there. And then when I went into doing photography more as a business, I found I became more business minded, and the true me began to disappear. You know, you start maybe behaving in different ways or doing things that you think might get you more views or that kind of stuff. And it wasn't true to me. And it's only been in the last month or so that I've started to go back to that real me again. And that video of me walking barefoot on the beach, just connecting with nature fully, it's the first video I've put out in a long time that I was 100% comfortable with, because I knew it was me. It was completely me, just me and nature reacting to things. And I don't know, I suppose speaking from the soul in some ways. So I think it's beautiful that you watched that and you found beauty in it, because it's like, for me, it's a process just now of finding myself again and having the courage to put myself out there as me, as, you know, the person that I kind of am, without maybe playing up to the camera a little bit or that kind of stuff. And what I kind of wanted to ask you is, when you began your business, how, because your story is so personal and what you're doing specifically now, you know, not maybe thinking about your wedding days and stuff, but specifically what you're doing now, did you find a lot of fear in that? You know, putting yourself out there and offering such a vulnerable thing. Did you feel inside of you, oh, like, can I do this? What are people going to think? And because I find that's my issue. I have a lot of resistance towards myself and my true authenticity. Even though I know that when I am truly authentic, people like me more, or not necessarily like me more, but I accept myself more and people resonate with that more. Whereas when you're trying to be something you're not, it doesn't really work. And I just
because people, whether it's as conscious or subconscious, they know when you're not being authentic and they switch off. So I was really amazed when the first image I shared, which I always thought was the barbed wire with the barbed wire around my, it wasn't. It was one where I wasn't showing my face. So that was really for me a toe in the water, and it was on World International Mental Health Day 2018. It was the first time I showed an image, and I was scared, and I didn't put any of my story in that. I just showed an image, and the response I got to that was astonishing, which gave me more confidence to share again. And I find the more vulnerable and the more honest and the more open I am, the more that gives permission for other people to be the same and to respond to me. So I think the whole thing is still a process for me. So and I didn't do anything more than vaguely consciously. So, you know, what I did in the shoot, how long I waited between first looking at them and second looking at them, it was all because I felt like it. Then I did a freedom shoot, and I also photographed my inner critic that day as well. But then I shared an image, and I never thought I'd ever share an image, but I felt like I wanted to. I felt like I'd borne witness to myself, I'd seen myself, and now I wanted the world to see me. So and so I just turned a little bit towards the world, so but not the big wide world, just my kind of immediate Facebook world, just my friends, and they were really lovely to me, which was really nice. And then that gave me the confidence to then go out to the wider world and people I didn't know, and to share my story. And those are the posts that always get the most response. It is my story about what I did. And you know, I kind of still find it amazing, because when I talk about, you know, the more I talk about my story, the more kind of matter of fact I feel I can get about it, which is why I loved your question earlier so much, which you brought me right back to how I felt, and how I obviously still do feel about it. And it really spurs me on to just keep going, to keep being brave, because I did that shoot, because I felt, you know, I had courage to do that shoot. And that's what the women do when they come. They have so much courage to come and do the shoot with me, and it's so beautiful. But that courage then perpetuates other courage. So I'm now doing things I never ever thought I'd do. And I kind of am waiting for somebody to, you know, to turn around and go, oh, actually no, it's not you, Kath, it's a different one. It's a different Kath, it's not you, we don't want you. So there's something about the courage, you know, being courageous in myself, giving other people courage, and giving myself more courage to do more stuff. And you mentioned, I love that you mentioned earlier, you've mentioned it twice actually, about your soul, and it's stuff that brings your joy to your soul. And freedom shoots, my freedom shoots make my soul sing. That's how I always describe it. It is such a privilege doing work that makes me feel alive and completely connected to the universe and why I'm here, and what I feel I'm called to do at this moment. And that may change, but yeah, it's such a joy.
It's beautiful. You were explaining earlier how doing that shoot for yourself helped you reconnect with your spirituality, and this is kind of the stage I'm in my life just now. I think this is why I was so pulled into your webinar again. It was the wording that you used to describe what you do. It really resonates with me at the moment. And when you look at your website and you look at how you explain what your freedom shoots do for people, and you can, although you're not necessarily maybe using, you know, spiritual language, you have that whole spiritual element throughout it, and you're helping people connect with the true them and uncover, you know, their purpose and get rid of their fears and learn to love themselves, you know, because they say, don't they, that the highest vibration is love, and when we leave this world it's all about love, and it's about, when we're here, about finding that, you know, within ourselves and within others, and giving it out. And what you're doing is 100% that. And I wanted to, you kind of touched on this earlier, but I did want to say, you know, have you always been aware of your spirituality? It does sound like from what you were saying that when you were depressed, you kind of lost a lot of that connection with your soul and with your purpose and why you were here. And suddenly now you've reconnected with all of that, and it's so beautiful.
Thank you. And I love that you made that connection, that spiritual connection with Freedom Shoots. I hadn't seen that or felt that. I mean, I do feel it, but I hadn't, that's not been reflected back to me. So thank you so much for that. And so I was brought up going to church. And so I did have that. And in fact, I did a religious studies degree because I was trying to work out what the hell I believed in. And I did lose it for a very, very long time. And it did, when I first started kind of reconnecting with that, I couldn't walk into any kind of spiritual building without crying my eyes out. And in fact, a lot of the time I couldn't go in because I knew how much emotion there was going to be there. And I never really worked out what that was about. I just knew that was there, and there was an awful lot of work to do. And interestingly, you know, recently I've found that I've had very difficult the past few weeks. My mother died last year, and it's her 1 year anniversary in the next few days, and I'm finding that really difficult. And that's really kind of blown my spirituality out the water. Existential crisis city. But I'm learning to get my head around that and work out what that means to me and how I can use that positively. Because for me, it's all about life is very tricky, and life is very stressful and traumatic and joyous and beautiful and amazing. And it's about how do you navigate those storms in a way that means that your growth is more positive, because it's so easy to get sucked into a really dark place. Well, it is for me, a dark place again. And sometimes, you know, before I know it, I'm in this pit of despair. And I have to work out how I got there so I can get myself out again. And I've been going through kind of a bit of that recently, and I'm just coming out of that. So the timing of this interview is amazing, and I feel like I've reconnected again with who I am. I kind of lost my way a little bit, and my images help me stay there, help remind me. They literally pull me back, and they go, no, you know, you are not going down there again. You know, you don't need to. You're beyond that, and this is who you are. So they're like, you know, slapping me around the face, going, "Wake up, Kath. You know, you're all right. This is who you are. Off you go again." And so I can't remember what your question was, but it's the spirituality. So it's been, you know, it's just a roller coaster all the time. But I think what my images have done for me is they've set the bar differently. So when the bar was, you know, as low as it could be, and I don't think there even was a bar for most of my life, but now the bar is here, and I've got this grounding and I've got this, my images are my safety net. You know, they're where I go every single time when things are difficult, because that is where I find my courage and my bravery again, and help me to just get on and re-believe in myself, you know, because it can go, especially, you know, the last 2 years have been horrific.
They have been. It's interesting to see how everyone's kind of adapted to it differently. I always say that the whole COVID pandemic actually changed my life, because it was because of COVID, and then I also lost a family member last year. My granny passed away. Through that, it's actually made me look into my spirituality, because I've had that time away from people to discover myself and to work on myself. And I personally have found the last few years incredibly empowering, whereas the vast majority of people have found it a terrifying world, and it's been really difficult to navigate. It's so interesting to see how we all, you know, cope with these things differently, but also underneath all of that, especially in our case, how much creativity plays a part in that, and that connection to self and whatnot, which, you know, is just beautiful. And I during this interview, I will have put up a number of your images that you've sent and shared with me, but there's one client that you spoke about during the She Clicks interview, and I just thought it was beautiful. And I just love you, you know, before we wrap up for today, to talk through especially this lady here, because what your photography did for her and the effect that also had on you, it's just so beautiful. And I would love you to share this story with people.
Amazing, Katie. So Katie came to do a face-to-face shoot, and we have a mutual friend. And so I hadn't met Katie before she came to do the shoot, and her friend had said to her, you know, our mutual friend had said, you know, Kath's doing this, I really think that you would benefit from it. And she was like, having my photograph taken and talking about my mental health are the two things that I like doing the least. Putting them together, you must be joking. And it took a bit for her friend to convince her, but she did. And she walked through the door and she sat down. And, you know, that's the biggest thing. If you can get through the door, you've won. That's, you know, it's a massive win. And that the courage to come through the door, I think, is the biggest thing. And she sat down, and we had a bit of a chat, and I just looked at her and I said, you're ready. You're really ready for this. And that phrase really stuck with her. Every time I talk to her about her shoot, she mentions it, which is lovely. And she was in a really difficult place, but what the shoot has showed her is how courageous she is. And she's got this incredible Instagram account. She's got 5,500 followers. So she set up her Instagram account after doing the shoot. She started doing lives, which she never thought she'd do. And because she had the courage to do the shoot, that gave her courage. Like we were talking about earlier, that gave her courage to do other things. So she did her Instagram account. She's lobbied the local council for, it's got to be at least a year and a half, to for funding to run a youth group in her village. And she said to me explicitly, she never would have done that if she hadn't done the shoot. And I just find that so humbling and so amazing. And she inspires me all the time, because we're still in touch, and we still hang out for coffee every now and again. And it's just wonderful to watch her journey. And, you know, she's just beautiful. And I'm lost for words again. But I mean, that quote, you know, it really helped me to accept myself. That's just, you know, when you can do that, getting validation from other people is so important. But if you can give it to yourself, that's the ultimate freeing thing. You know, if you can go, okay, you know, I'm actually all right. I can do this. I've got the resources I need to look after myself, and, you know, and fly. And that's what she saw in herself. So it was such a privilege.
So like, just to hear that story again, it really makes my heart sing. I just think it's so beautiful. And, you know, I suppose you don't really maybe think about it that much, but, you know, it's such a privilege that you have this gift and this talent, and you can then do this for other people. And, you know, I believe that everything in life happens for a reason. And, you know, we look back at our lives and see the dark times, and, you know, they were horrific and heartbreaking, but when you can move through them, the lessons you learn from them, you know, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing now and changing all these people's lives if you hadn't have been through what you'd been through. And, you know, while, you know, we all wish sometimes that things that have happened in the past hadn't happened, when we actually look at them positively, or look at them from a different standpoint, we start to realise, I wouldn't be where I am today without that, and you wouldn't be doing these photo shoots without that. And I think that's something powerful that I'd like to end on today, because, you know, a lot of people have we all have struggles in life. We've all been through something traumatic at some point in our life, or something that's broken our heart, or whatever it may be. And a lot of us get stuck in that place, or we don't know how to deal with those emotions. But actually, when we can find a way that works for us to release them and to work through them, and usually that's through working with other people in some way or another, the empowerment that we get from that is incredible. And I just think what you're doing is amazing, and I can't wait to follow along on everything you're kind of doing in the future, and just see how much more lives you can change with photography and your freedom shoots.
Thank you. That's really kind. And the work that I do is it can be really tough. And the biggest lesson I've learned is that through is always the way. And if you're doing something it's not working, do the opposite. What is the opposite of what you're doing, or what is the perspective that you've not taken or not gone to have a look differently at what you're doing or what's going on. And I never, that great saying, the lessons will always come until you learn them. And I don't learn until I do something different. So it was like with my inner critic, which is, I have this thing that I devised following the shoot I did for when I photographed my inner critic, and what I learned in that allowed me to change my perspective on my inner critic, and I relate to her in a totally different way now, so I can quieten her down whenever I want to. That's part of the process of what I teach my clients. But it's about doing the opposite to maybe what everyone has taught you. So everyone always said to me, you've got to fight your inner critic, you've got to push it away, blah blah blah. And so I thought, well, what's the opposite of that? And that's what I did. I don't do that. I love her and I accept her and I manage her, but I don't try and push her away, because she's part of me and she has a voice that needs to be heard. And by hearing the voice, then they go, oh, I'm validated now, so I can just trot off and do something else. So it's all about continual self-validation, every part of you, And I recently I connected with a different part of my anger, which was extraordinary, because I did this visualization and I connected with her, and I moved away from it in the visualization, and I came back to it, and she'd calmed down, and she was just this little child hopping from foot to foot, needing to be seen. And when you can get that different perspective, stuff isn't scary anymore, and stuff is manageable. But you got to go through it. You can't go round it or above it like that children's book. You have to go through it. That's the quickest and the most powerful way. Go through it and feel it, and it's never as bad as we think it's going to be.
That's beautiful, and I can resonate with that, and I hope that everyone listening to this can as well. It's tough to go through it, but you have to, don't you? You just have to. And I think that's a great, I don't know what to call it, a life lesson, or I don't know, epiphany maybe for people in some ways to end on today. This chat has been so beautiful, and I just want to say again, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute honour to interview you, and an honour for you to be as open and honest as you have been with me. It's a real privilege, and I would love to see you continuing on this journey and continuing to be so open and honest, publicly about, your life and your work, because you are helping a lot of people, and it's such an honour to have been a part of that today. So thank you so much.
Bless you. Well, thank you ever so much. It's been really, really lovely to talk to you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
If you would like to learn more about Kathryn's work and the shoots that she has on offer, you can do so now by heading over to her website.